What's up everybody, Big Ramos LSD back again with video number 16. In this week's video, I'll be showing y'all how to make beautiful artwork with cheap brushes and materials. What brush you use, or pen, or paper, paint, or pen, digitally or traditionally, it doesn't really matter. If you don't have a grasp of the fundamentals and hella practice under your belt, you could use the most expensive materials on earth and still turn out some caca. So I'm gonna go through the process of making a portrait with watercolor of a friend of mine and fellow artist, Duckee. I saw a portrait that she did of herself on Instagram and she had posted the reference photo she used. So I decided to make my own version and use it as the subject of this video. I'm using the same materials that I've used to paint the majority of the things that I've posted on this channel. The only thing different this time is the paper I used. The paper felt a little different from the one I normally use. In the end, it turned out nice, but I really didn't like how it felt at first when I started using it. I just felt like it didn't soak up the paint how the other paper that I use normally does. The brushes I used were either low or medium in price, never really expensive. I've never really bought expensive brushes for watercolor. I bought some relatively expensive brushes for oil paint, but that's about it. In either medium, oil painting or watercolor, the brush is really of little significance, or the quality of the brush. Having nice brushes does help some, but if you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter. The mechanical pencils is the same thing. Lower medium in price, never expensive. Bottle of white gouache for highlights and errors. This watercolor set is also either low or medium in price. Old scrap pieces of watercolor paper to test out shades of paint, and paper towels to clean brushes and to potentially fix mistakes. An old cup for water and some old watercolor palettes to mix paint on, and my old cut in half drawing board. Again, I stress that all these materials are old and not fancy, very inexpensive. If you're balling, knock yourself out, but you don't need a lot of money or expensive materials to start creating dope art. Where the idea came from, I was brainstorming again with my brother, trying to come up with ideas that might do well on the platform. We always find it funny when art creators we watch comment on how much people ask and stress on what paint they use, or what brush they use, or what pen they use, or what paper they use. When it comes to digital work, I think it's even worse. I think it happens hella more. We felt that it'd be a good idea for a video. That made me think that that would be good for the thumbnail, just using what brush is that. Also, the point I'm trying to make, that you don't need expensive materials to create great art, I think that's really true and something that's worth sharing. And then using my friend as a muse, a lot of the videos I put out on here have been like a little more niche, so I had the thought of who doesn't like a pretty face? Who doesn't love a pretty face? So I used her, and hopefully all these things help to make this video perform well. Shit, I hope so.
I hope so.
Okay. Yeah.
Alright, finally let's get to the art tips and music. One of the first things I did was tape my paper down so it wouldn't buckle. I normally don't do this, but I wanted to try and see if it really helps or not, and it does. It really does help. The paper doesn't buckle like when it's just loose on the board. I used some art tape, but that shit ended up being trash. More on that later. Again, this wasn't the paper that I normally use, so when I first started using it, I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to turn out good. When I first introduced the watercolor to it, I thought it was going to turn out whack, but it actually turned out nice. Because I've been drawing and painting for hella long, I used my fingers to feel out and measure where I wanted to place the figure, like how big I wanted it, and just trying to figure out where I wanted to put it. Always using and keeping my reference nearby. So I got to it and started drawing her face. I had put down her mouth, but it felt a little high or off and wrong. So I erased it and redrew it a little lower. This is an example on why it's a good habit to start your drawings using light lines, so it's easy to edit and erase without fucking up your paper. Once the placement is locked in and to your liking, you can start darkening the lines. A little clarification on the video. I've been drawing my whole life and painting since I was 19. I'm 39 now. Hello. I went to college for drawing and painting. I say that to say this in this video. This video isn't an exact step-by-step on how to create a painting like this, but the idea behind this video is that with a lot of work and practice, you can create great art. The quality of the supplies and the materials is irrelevant. I thought it was Rembrandt that said this, but it wasn't. With some research, I found out that it was John Ruskin. Give me some mud off of a city crossing, some ochre out of a gravel pit, a little whitening and some coal dust, and I will paint you a luminous picture. If you give me time to graduate my mud and subdue my dust. When I heard this in school, I remember it being said that it was a quote that Rembrandt said, and that really stuck with me because he's one of my favorite painters. But this guy could paint really, really dope too. It really stuck with me, and I took it as it meaning that you could use very humble materials and still turn out masterpieces. It doesn't matter if you're using expensive stuff or not. If you don't have control of the fundamentals and the basic skills, it doesn't matter what you use. I didn't start to darken the stuff until I was sure the placement and everything was to my liking. The drawing is so important. If your line art / drawing is solid, your painting / coloring process will be hella easier. Another famous quote from Jeffrey Stokes: "You can't polish a turd." That's from a book from 1976 called Star Making Machinery Inside the Business of Rock and Roll. was just gonna make the background purple and orange sky, but I decided to add a beach scene instead. They aren't that hard to do, and people seem to like them. Who doesn't like an ocean view? Once my line art was on point and everything was locked in, it was time to start using the watercolors. Watercolors. Yeah. When doing watercolors, it's pretty much always a good idea to knock out your background first. It just makes shit easier. For smooth areas of paint, transitions, and gradients like in the sky, get that area wet first with just water. Then you can apply your color. Using this technique, you could get smoother gradients and transitions. You can get smooth gradients and areas with less streaks and ugliness. This is much harder to do if you don't put down that water first. Remind yourself what your focal point is. Make sure your background is solid, but it's not the main focus. She is. Keep it light in the background relative to the midground and foreground to push the feeling of the background further back. I applied the same technique on her as I did on the background to get the smooth application of paint in big areas or any given area. It helps a lot with big areas of paint. The hair was a smaller area to fill in, so I went straight in with the paint. I didn't use the get wet first technique like in the larger areas. You always need to be conscious of whatever area you're actively painting. Like, what is it? What material is it? What's it made out of? For example, here, because it was hair, I didn't care. Shit, what time is it? It's 1:42 a.m. God damn it. Because the area I was painting was hair, I didn't care as much if the coverage ended up a little more patchy. Remember to leave out your highlights by leaving white areas in specific spots. If you forget or fuck up, don't worry, happens all the time. That's why you have that gouache or some acrylic paint. Both work well with watercolors. You could just get some white paint in either one of those and use that to put in your highlights or fix things if you mess up. Now that all the major areas had a base coat, I started to darken areas without doing the get wet first technique. Remember, reference is king. Start to darken areas all over the painting according to the reference and the line art I put down. Now it's pretty much just a game of bouncing around, darkening areas according to the reference. You might think that things are dark enough, but once you darken something else, you start to see that another area isn't necessarily as dark as you want it to be. You see that you're wrong and need to darken them some more. Everything is relative to one another and plays off of each other. That's why it's important to fill your canvas up as fast as possible so you can start to see how things are going to play off of each other. Don't put off areas that you don't want to address for whatever reason. It will eventually fuck you in more than one way. Call me Squints Palledorous. Another good idea is to squint when looking at your reference to get a general idea of how dark or light things are without getting caught up in all the detail. Now squint and look at your painting and you'll be able to see how on or off you are to your reference as far as the darkness and lightness and level of saturation of whatever area you're looking at. For example, here I thought her face and body were already dark enough, but when I looked at the reference and kind of squinted to see, I was off and I started to darken it a little more. To tell myself to stop being a bitch and add another layer to the painting.
I mean, why you gotta be such a bitch? Hey.
Now that the overall painting is worked up, you can go back and start to finesse little smaller things that aren't necessarily that important. I mean, everything is important, but it's not the main focus. For example, I used some of that white gouache paint to add a little bit of froth to the waves in the background. Here I used an old comic that I've been rereading to focus my camera. It's actually a smart way to make sure your picture is going to be in focus when you're starting from a blank sheet of paper. I'll put down like a comic or a magazine and focus on that, so I know that once I start building the line art up, things will be in focus. Joe Mad, one of my favorite artists ever. Battle Chasers is hard. Enough said.
Perfect.
I was getting close to the point of stopping while you're ahead or knowing when to call it quits, because you can fuck it up. It's as easy as a flick of the wrist and splashing tiny little dots on the painting. It happened on that Attack on Titan painting I did, and I had to go in there and try and pick that shit up, and it's not the easiest thing to do with watercolors, so be careful. And again, learn when to call it quits. One thing to always remember and keep in mind is that we are not machines. We'll never get a one-of-one reproduction of the photo or life reference we're using as a muse. This is only our interpretation of what we see. And remember, you don't have to be a slave to your reference either. It all depends on the task at hand. What are you trying to do? If this was a cartoon version, I could have made it a little more cartoony or like an anime style and still use this same photo for reference, but I wanted to make this a more realistic painting. Just because I haven't done stuff like this on the channel yet, I don't think. Some are and some haven't been, but you know. So you only need to get as close as you feel looks good. For example, her lip color is a little different than what's in the reference. I did as best I could with what I had. Another thing to remember is that unless you share that reference, nobody's really gonna see it. In most cases, people will never see what the painting was actually based on unless you share that or they go out their way to look that up. So really, they don't have a point of reference to compare it to be able to say how close you are to it or if you're wrong on how you decide to portray the subject at hand. It all depends on what you're trying to do and who it's for. The final touches consisted of refining things over and over until you're happy. Again, be careful because you could fuck some shit up easy. But like I always say, don't be scared. Life's a risk, Carnal.
Hey, life's a risk, Carnal.
Here went the untaping of the edges. Big fucking swing and a miss. This is supposed to be some art tape, and it still pulled up the paper and didn't keep a crisp edge, didn't keep a crisp seal. Boo boo, basura. Any suggestions on some tape that's good for this? Frog tape? I don't know. If you know which tape is good, leave it in the comments. I had to go in there and touch up the edges and fix a couple of spots. Shitty ass tape. Hella weak. Hella sorry ass tape. Here go a couple more final touches, then I signed it and dated it, and then final little touch here and there. Then it was time to take some photos and do some editing in Photoshop. After all that, I was pretty much done, besides making the video. Now let's get to the final product. I feel about the piece. I really like how the painting turned out. I think it looks really good. I also like the fact that I knocked it out in about 7 or 8 hours. I feel like I got her likeness. I think it's on point. The lips look juicy, the eyes look alive, the skin looks good. I can't really complain. I want to stress again the fact that all the materials I used, from the brushes to the paint to the paper and the pencils, they were all old as fuck and cheap as fuck too. It's all about the fundamentals, practice, repetition, and consistency. It's like working out or making music. You gotta hit the gym, you gotta hit the studio, and put in hella reps. Put in hella time, blood, sweat, and tears, all that shit. Then you'll get good. Again, what brush you use is completely irrelevant. Have you developed a skill set or not? We are lucky as fuck we live in the YouTube age. We got infinite tutorials, video tutorials. I remember being online in like 1999, 2000, looking at written tutorials with pictures. They were still dope, hella fire, but we're spoiled today. It was hot shit back then, but now we got hot shit that's on a whole nother level. We got it easy, we're spoiled, so take advantage and learn anything that you want to master. Get good at whatever you want. To get better at painting and drawing, draw and paint as much as possible with whatever you got, and you will get good. Thank you again so much for watching. If you made it all the way through, I really appreciate it. I hella appreciate it. I've been trying to make all my videos as clean as possible, so I hope y'all enjoy them. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to not miss the next video. Next week, I might be doing another Fools Gone Wild design, or I'm not sure. If I decide to knock out another painting or something, it might be something different. I've been thinking of doing some more known comic book characters or characters from animes or mangas, something along those lines, but we shall see. Thank you again. Y'all be safe, and I'll see y'all next week. All right, y'all. Peace. This thing is clean, can't make clutch. See how big it is compared to my big ass head. Turned out nice though. Alright, y'all.